Good evening, Americans. I'm here to talk to y'all about some shit. My little dress pet. Look at her. You see it in the light? What's up, guys? Babs Money here with another episode of Dragatha Christie's Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah. Normally I don't have a magnifying glass, but my mother happens to have one in her dwelling.
Look at these lips.
Can you take it, America?
Pay no mind to the different background. I know y'all are used to seeing different backgrounds for my videos anyway, but this is entirely new because I am house sitting for my parents. So I brought my stuff with me so that I could do a video while I'm here. So pay no attention to my mother's reminder for me to check the dog's water. There's reminders all over this house, girl. My mom is one of those moms. Y'all know how it is. Today we will be discussing the murder of O'Neal Moore. This occurred on Wednesday, June 2nd, 1965 in Varnado, Louisiana. So a little over 55 years ago. I can't find much on his actual upbringing and childhood, but I do know that O'Neal Moore was born on April 23rd, 1931, somewhere in the state of Louisiana. At this time, Mr. Moore was a 34-year-old. This shit over here turned off, so she's trying it. Mr. Moore was a 34-year-old married Army veteran and also a father of four daughters specifically. This happened during the height of the civil rights movement, and it was during this time that the black community of Washington Parish began to push for integration of the sheriff's department. In response, 2 black deputies were appointed to the department, David aka Creed Rogers and O'Neal Moore. And with their appointment, the 2 deputies became the first black police officers in Washington Parish. So a very big deal for the time, deep in the dirty South in wherever the hell Louisiana, and they're the first 2 black deputies on the force. Mind you, the fact that the black community was able to push for something like this back in the 60s and actually get something is amazing to me. Come through, Varnado. The Rogers and Moore families were very excited for the deputies. However, as can be imagined, many members of the community were not okay with black people taking part in law enforcement in any way, shape, or form. Because they were some bitches. Stupid ass white people suck. Now, you have to keep in mind, at this time, deputies like Rogers and Moore were not allowed to even confront white people, let alone arrest them. Despite all of this, Rogers and Moore persevered. And you have to think, they were incredibly strong for this. They lived in a white world that just tolerated their existence. And they promised each other that they were not going to let their community down. On Wednesday, June 2nd, 1965, the deputies had been on the department for a year now, so they had become used to harassment. My biggest thing is, what's the problem with them being police officers? That's what's most disgusting to me. These racists looked down on black people in such a way that they would be ashamed if a black person saved their life. If they were helped by a black doctor or a black police officer, it would eat them alive because they can't bear the fact that someone they find so repulsive saved them. And the reason why is because it makes them have to look in the mirror and realize, and you're a piece of shit. Now, like I said, they had become used to harassment. Because of this, it was no surprise to them when a pickup truck started to tailgate them. Bitch, let me tell you, I cannot stand for a motherfucker to tailgate me. When they got onto an area called Peters Hill, they noticed a fire on the left side of the road. So they then made a U-turn to go inspect the fire, of course. You don't want bitches burning down and shit in your town, even though that's what they want for you. When the deputies looked more closely, they realized that it was a trash fire and nothing dangerous. So they then made another U-turn and headed south down the road. The pickup truck that they had seen earlier that night had pulled off to the right side of the road, so that when they made their second U-turn and were coming back, when they passed the truck, it pulled out and began to follow them again. You already see where this is going. Deputy Rogers noticed that it was a black truck with a white rail, and the front of the truck had a Confederate flag rebel tag on it. For those of you who like to sit there and say, what is the big deal behind the Confederate flag? Peace, love, and happiness. That's what it stands for, right? Girl, bye. As the deputies continued to drive south, the truck sped up and pulled up next to them. At least 2 people that were in the truck began firing at deputies Rogers and Moore, who were both hit as Moore lost control of the car and crashed into a tree. I have a picture, and this is where the crash took place. The tree in the top right corner is the one that Deputy Moore ran into. O'Neal died instantly because he received a gunshot wound to the head. Deputy Rogers sustained several injuries, mainly one to his eye, but he survived. After hearing the gunshots, a local resident ran to the scene, and he found the deputies badly injured, and this person stood guard until the police arrived. Chief Deputy Sheriff Doyle Holliday arrived a few minutes later. Now, I wasn't able to find any pictures or actually too much information at all about Doyle Holliday, but from what I read, he was a very good man who stood behind these deputies 100% and did everything he could that was within his power to bring justice to this case. Holliday began an intense investigation that would consume the next several months. Deputy Rogers was able to describe the truck in precise detail to Holliday, at which point he put out an all-points bulletin for the truck.
Shut up! Damn!
It was about a half hour later that Holliday learned a truck matching the description had just been apprehended in Tylertown, Mississippi.
Haha! Gotcha, bitch! You the damn fool!
The truck fit the description except for the fact that at the time of its apprehension, the truck had no side rails. So bitch, as far as I'm concerned, it's you.
Ho!
And mind you, the truck was stopped only about 20 miles from the scene of the shooting. The driver, who I'm going to get into later, his name was Ernest Ray McElveen. He was arrested, but was later released on a bond of $25,000. And just to give you an idea, in 2020 money, that's almost $204,000. So a substantial bond for the time. However, due to lack of evidence, ain't it funny how that's always how this happens? Baloney, sir! Get off it!
Come up off the pot if you ain't shitting.
Well, naturally, suspicion fell on the Ku Klux Klan, but the local chapter of the bigoted bedsheet bitches denied any involvement, of course. They denied that immediately, mind you, which isn't shocking. Gotta cover your ass. Don't see how you gotta cover it anymore when you're wearing a tarp every day. At the time, racial tensions increased in the area. However, the sheriff refused to give in to pressure, and the spot left by O'Neal Moore was then filled by another black deputy. Work! They said, you don't want no more black officers? Bam! They in the bitch now. Meanwhile, a group known as the Deacons for Defense and Justice provided armed protection and support for Deputy Moore's widow and family. I have 2 pictures here. One is of his widow, Mayvella Moore, with their daughters, and the second picture is of them attending his funeral. Mayvella even recalled that the shooting in no way accomplished what the assailants wanted. It did the opposite. Instead of frightening the remaining black officers, it inspired them and gave them more courage to continue to do their jobs every day. During all of this, Sheriff Holliday continued his investigation into the murder. It was only 2 weeks after the shooting that violence came to Sheriff Holliday's own home. That evening, he had just finished talking to the sheriff on the phone and was going to sit on the couch with his family when suddenly shots were fired into their home. Doyle, of course, had his family get down on the ground, grabbed his gun, and ran outside. The car was already fleeing. He shot at it as they fled away. Never found out who it was. Shortly after the shooting, they received a call from someone saying, "Did we get anyone?" And because of this, he naturally believes that this happened in an attempt to scare him into stopping his investigation. But of course, he and others involved refused to back down. At the time, there was a $25,000 reward. So like I said earlier, about $204,000 in today's money for any information involving the case. And this was being offered by the governor of Louisiana himself, John McKeithen, at that time. And despite this reward, the local population refused to cooperate with the FBI or with local authorities. In 1967, the case was deemed inactive, and Doyle believes that people were too afraid to come forward because the Klan, especially at that time, was too powerful and too strong, and people were afraid that if they came forward, that they or their families would be targeted, attacked, or killed. And that is a reasonable fear.
However, if you see something, say something, bitch.
Come forward. Clear the air. Let the shit be known. In June of 1987, 22 years after Deputy Moore's murder, the FBI field office in New Orleans was contacted by one informant and received letters from 2 other sources who were anonymous. They claimed that they could identify the people that were responsible for O'Neal Moore's murder. I have a really bad habit of not looking at the camera. When I'm talking, I look over here. It just looks like I'm talking to somebody else, but I'm not. I'm talking to y'all, the girls. Due to this new information, the case was reopened. According to FBI agent Michael Heimbach, one of these letters was very specific on identifying individuals that were in the pickup truck and identifying the truck's getaway route. The FBI has looked into the 3 individuals that were mentioned in the letter as being involved in the murder. So it ain't just Mr. Ernest Ray or whatever the I'm still gonna get into him too. The FBI has interviewed these people's families and people associated with them. The FBI believes that the killers belong to the Ku Klux Klan, but they have also said that they do not have enough information to make any arrests. It has been decades since the fateful night that deputies O'Neal Moore and Creed Rogers took their last ride together, and afterwards Rogers refused to be scared away from his chosen career. And good for him. In 1988, 23 years after the shooting, he retired as a full captain of the Washington Parish Sheriff's Department. Sadly, Deputy Rogers died in 2007, still wondering who was responsible for the shooting. And he constantly worried that whoever was responsible would come back for him someday. Doyle Holliday noted that these individuals were getting older and may want to come forward before they die. Now he said, bitch, you about to die anyway. So like, ain't nothing else we can do to you.
Psych. Throw their own ass in jail. Hiya!
Now, Doyle Holliday eventually passed away in 1998. O'Neal Moore's loved ones still hold hope that one day the case will be solved and we will all know who the killer or killers were. The case was reopened 2 more times, once in 2001 and then again in 2009 by the Civil Rights Era Cold Case Initiative. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, somebody's calling me. Hold on. Girl, I had a call come in for the doll. What was I saying to y'all? Now, as I said, the prime suspect in the case was Ernest, aka Ray McElveen, who was a known white supremacist. He eventually died in 2003 without ever being charged in the case. He got to live his happy little life for 38 more years, but then he oopsie-daisied. F*** you, Ernie! At the time that the charges against him were dropped, he was being represented by a Baton Rouge attorney named Osier Brown, who had previously represented the 2 men tried in the murder of Clarence Triggs. One was acquitted and the other was never tried. Go figure. That's how that usually went back then. That's how that usually goes now. In 2016, the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice recommended that the case be closed due to the passage of time and due to the fact that most witnesses and possible suspects in the case are already dead. You know what I say to that? I don't care. You still gotta be held accountable for your shit, and it needs to go down on the records, and you need to be brought down to the knees of God, and the truth needs to be known. So no, ma'am. But that is the case of the murder of O'Neal Moore. I believe that Ray McElveen was involved and had 1 or 2, maybe more, accomplices. The letter that the FBI received said there were 3 bitches involved. Count them. 1, 2, 3. Oh! Either way, I know he was involved because he was driving the damn truck and they found that like 20 miles away. Ain't no way that you just happen to be 30, 40 minutes from where the shooting just happened in a truck that matches the description. Out of here.
Cut it!
Let me talk to y'all real quick. I wish y'all could see the way I have this set up, this rigorama. I know next I'm going to do Kendrick Johnson because that's what I have my notes ready for. After that, I want to do like a double feature where I do first Tamala Horsford and then Sandra Bland. And then there's another case where I want to tie 3 cases together just because there's not a lot of information on them. There's Keith Warren, who was a teen who allegedly hung himself and it's a possible police cover-up. Then Keith Dungy, this was in Durham, North Carolina. This teen, I believe he was a teenager, was in a car with his friends and they were being not chased per se, but followed and harassed by this particular car that ran them off the road and he ended up dying from his injuries. And then Kelso Cochran, who was a black man in London who was killed by a gang of white youths and none of them were ever charged. So yeah, I'm gonna get into all those. There's a whole lot more. There's one I really want to get into, Lewis Allen. And this was a black man living in Liberty, Missouri, who had information about another black Liberty man being killed by a white state legislator. He faced increasing harassment after that and was going to move to Wisconsin and was killed the day before. And a lot of people think like the sheriff was involved or some shit. I'm gonna get into Lavina Johnson at some point as well. The military case where the family is convinced that the army covered up a murder. A lot of cases, but please comment below ones that I might not know of, might not have thought of, or what have you, because we will get into it, Diva. With all of this crazy shit being said, Miss Mama, Miss God. As always, I am Babs Money, aka Ragatha Christie, and I am signing off for now because a bitch is hungry as hell and my nana made some chicken and dumplings and you know what that means.
Slurp, slurp, gig, gig, boom, boom.
Until next time, money chasers, good night. Woo!